Truth is, with 100 million Americans daily on TikTok on an average of 90 minutes a day, this is an issue. I imagine most of you would like your networks to get 90 minutes a day from 100 million Americans. We've got to make sure that we take care of that national security-based concern. The Restrict Act is more than about TikTok. It will give us that comprehensive approach.
These are rooms you're not allowed to go inside. Mount Rushmore is one of the most famous landmarks in the USA, but almost no one knows that it has a secret room inside it that no one can enter. Located behind the heads of the presidents is a secret doorway.
Aliens really exist in Area 51. It's believed that the US government is hiding something big. Many people have claimed to have seen UFOs there.
Salt Pit, Afghanistan. Salt Pit is a secret CIA-run prison in Afghanistan. It is one of the several prisons that were set up by the CIA after the September attack in New York and was intended to hold people suspected of having links with radical criminals. The torment of prisoners happened every day in Salt Pit, and prisoners were often subjected to inhumane punishments and conditions, including mock executions. Its cells are small and without windows or toilets, and due to this, the prisoners have to relieve themselves in a bucket. Inmates are also stripped naked and made to sleep on cold concrete floors. CIA operatives always kept loud music playing as a form of psychological torture. Now, Dr. Garrett Bahir, who was held at the prison for 6 months, revealed that the CIA interrogators tied him to a chair and sat on his stomach. Another Gul Raham, who later died in custody and remains the only verified death at the prison, experienced more violent punishment. He was stripped naked, his hands chained over his head while he was repeatedly beaten and drenched with buckets of water. Gul died of hypothermia on the morning of November 20th, 2002, and the CIA did not return his body to his family or inform them of his. Now, beginning in April 2021 until the final withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, large sections of the Salt Pit were demolished by the departing personnel before the Taliban gained control of the site. Number 9. Camp 7, Guantanamo Bay. Camp 7 was built in a hidden location away from the main prison. Camp 7 was so carefully hidden that no one knew of its existence for 2 years after it opened in 2006. Now, Camp 7 was home to 15 prisoners the CIA considered high-value detainees. One was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was seen as the mastermind of the September attack. The CIA has been accused of mistreating the prisoners, and when its existence was revealed, journalists were not allowed to visit. The Red Cross was allowed in on the condition that it never publicly speak about what it saw. One of its inmates, Razmi bin al-Shia, complained that his cell always vibrated and made some strange noises. Now, the US military denied all accusations of psychological torture and claimed he was just hearing things, but in 2014 the Pentagon confessed that he was hearing real noises, but said it was the result of the prison falling apart. Number 8. The Resort, North Korea. Inmates at the resort aren't radical criminals, but blacklisted relatives and officials of the North Korean oligarchy. It's located just 30 miles away from the Chinese border, and the resort is believed to hold up around 1,000 people. It has so many inmates because prisoners will often move in with their families. Now, while heavily guarded, it does not look like a prison, but more like a small town. Prisoners do not try to escape since the living conditions aren't bad. They don't perform any hard labor or endure any additional punishment and get free cooked meals every day. Kim Sung-ae is one of the people suspected of being held at the resort. She used to be the second wife of the late president Kim Il-sung. Another suspected prisoner is the aunt of the current president Kim Jong-un. She's the wife of Jang Song-taek, who was taken to the resort after her husband was executed in December 2013. But for North Korea, these conditions seem a little too good to me. Number 7. Cat's Eye, Thailand. Cat's Eye was a secret CIA prison in Thailand, and it could still be active today since no one knows its precise location. Everyone agrees that it is in Thailand, and even though the CIA and Thai government deny its existence. Cat's Eye was exposed in a 2014 US Senate report in which its location was listed as country redacted. Now, the prison was hurriedly set up in 2002 to hold Abdul Zuba, who was suspected to be one of bin Laden's henchmen. Abdul was picked up in Pakistan in March 2002, and the CIA was confused on where to keep him. They wanted a place far away from US jurisdiction and the Red Cross, so they built Cat's Eye. For several months, he was the only inmate held there, and he lived inside a box that was no bigger than a coffin and was continuously waterboarded until he fainted. CIA used him to test out several of their enhanced interrogation techniques. Cat's Eye's second prisoner was Abd al-Rahim al-Narshi, who arrived there in November 2002. Both prisoners were frequently slapped, stripped, and deprived of sleep. Cat's Eye was reportedly shut down in December 2002 after the CIA moved the inmates to another black site in Poland, but who knows if they're secretly still active today.
Next up, we have the horrors carried out in Unit 731, a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army. It was active from 1937 to 1945. There were brutal human experiments carried out on a large scale. 200,000 to 300,000 people died as a result of these experiments. I mean, even calling what went on here experimentation is a stretch. This was basically just pure torment. Unit 731's goal was to develop biological and chemical weapons, and they were testing the effects of various pathogens and toxins on the human body. So they tested this stuff mostly on Chinese prisoners of war. Inhumane, but not all that surprising. What is more surprising, though, is that even civilians were used as fodder. These experiments involved exposing people to deadly diseases like the bubonic plague and anthrax. Victims were also dissected while awake. There were frostbite studies where victims were forced to stand out in the freezing cold until they got frostbite. It was just complete and utter madness, and what went on here didn't become known until after World War II. And here's another super messed up thing. In exchange for their research data, a lot of the researchers of Unit 731 were pardoned for their war crimes by the United States as part of a secret deal. Ever have that feeling like Big Brother is watching you? Well, with the internet, I think people are more paranoid about this than ever, but Operation Chaos has become one of the most infamous cases of government overreach when it comes to surveillance. So this was a covert program carried out by the CIA to monitor and gather intelligence on domestic descendant groups who were opposed to the Vietnam War. This was not a popular war, and the US government was concerned that there were foreign influences fueling the anti-war movement at the time. The CIA set out to collect information on anti-war activists, student groups, and anyone else really that they believed might have had connections to foreign governments or were influenced by communist ideology. The CIA conducted surveillance, they gathered intelligence, and they compiled dossiers on thousands of US citizens. They were secretly monitoring people's activities, collecting information on their personal lives. Undercover agents would also infiltrate anti-war groups to gather info from within the organizations they were monitoring. Now, whatever your political views are, this whole thing was clearly a violation of people's privacy. Very un-American, at least in the rose-tinted glasses ideal of what America was supposed to be. Now, there's a lot of United States on this list, but Canada, we're not innocent either. There's been some incredibly dark stuff that's gone on here, mostly relating to the Indigenous population. Residential schools in Canada were institutions Aboriginals were forced into with the aim of assimilating them, ridding them of their own culture, their language, and traditions into a more Western way of life. Now, you might think these schools were just a thing of the past, but the last one closed in 1996. They began operating in 1831, forcibly separating families. The Canadian government, in partnership with various religious groups, primarily the Catholic Church, established and operated these places, and most of what was going on here was unknown to the public, downplayed, or just not discussed. And the silence and lack of transparency really allowed for incredibly harmful practices to go on for a very long time. It's something that hasn't even been fully remedied to this day. Next on the list are the Drome experiments. Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia became notorious for experiments carried out by a complete mad scientist named Dr. Albert Kligman, who had a total lack of regard for human life. Dr. Albert Kligman was a dermatologist who carried out a range of very dangerous scientific tests on the inmates living in what became known as the Terror Drome, thanks to this doctor. Now, in the case of these studies, the inmates, in a sense, volunteered for these experiments, but it wasn't out of a genuine willingness to participate. Many of them were in desperate situations and saw the experiments as a way to earn some, small amounts of money. They were then subjected to a variety of experiments that can only be categorized as inhumane. He exposed them to microwave radiation, infected them with skin diseases, and conducted biochemical experiments on them, including exposing them to dioxin, which is a toxic substance that was used in Agent Orange. And when I say Kligman had a complete lack of care about these men's lives, I mean he literally saw them as inhuman. He famously said that all he saw when he entered the prison grounds for the first time was, quote, acres of skin, like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time, end quote. All the guy saw was raw material. It's pretty disturbing. Now we move on over to Sweden with the Holm Experiments. This study happened in Sweden from 1947 to about 1949. The purpose of it was to study the effects of sugar on teeth, but their way of going about it was completely unethical. In Holm Hospital in Lund, Sweden, mentally disabled patients were used as the subjects for the study. They were given excessive amounts of sugary foods like candy, chocolate, and toffees to observe the impact it would have on their teeth. Were vulnerable people. They weren't able to give proper informed consent here. They were used as subjects in a study without having a clear understanding of the risks involved. And yeah, surprise, surprise, but a lot of the participants' teeth became severely damaged. And the results of the tests weren't even made public till years and years later because the confectionery industry was helping sponsor it, and they weren't too pleased with the results. So they tried to just subdue the whole thing. So what happened to these poor people was kept a secret for decades. Next up, we have toxic waste in Area 51. So we don't know exactly what was going on here because it's Area 51. But there were employees who came out in the 90s saying they'd suffered because of some of the practices going on at the base. A number of Area 51 workers actually took the facility to court when they started developing all kinds of illnesses after exposure to hazardous material. The government had dumped a whole bunch of discarded hazardous waste into trenches the length of apparently football fields, and then would set them on fire. So there was just this toxic smoke that would fill the air, which became known as London fog by the workers. After long exposure to this stuff, many staff began developing serious illnesses later on in life, like horrible skin rashes, which they referred to as fish scales. They were like kind of hard membranes that would form in the arms, the hands, the legs, and their feet, and sometimes they would just use sandpaper to remove it. And many would also develop cancer and other respiratory illnesses. And because the workers weren't allowed to disclose anything about what was going on at the base, they had a very difficult time receiving proper medical care. But the big question is here, like, what was in that toxic waste? And finally, we have the infamous MK Ultra. This sounds like something from a conspiracy thriller, if that's even a real genre. I think you know what I mean, though. But this was really a thing that happened. MK Ultra was a secretive program carried out by the CIA in the 50s and 60s. And the goal was to explore mind control techniques and methods of altering human behavior. But a whole long list of messed up experiments were used. There was a big focus on illicit substances, mainly LSD, to study their potential for mind control and use in interrogations. Basically, they were trying to find substances that could manipulate a person's thoughts, emotions, and actions. They'd also employ psychological torment, like sensory deprivation and isolation. Some subjects were even the victims of SA. Most of these test subjects had no idea what they were actually in for. Some didn't even know they were part of experiments at all. This was being done all on the hush-hush. It wasn't until 1975 that the whole thing was finally exposed to the public. The majority of the files on MKUltra had been destroyed in 1973 though, so sworn testimonies from participants, pretty much all the prosecution had to rely on.
Kicking off the list at number 10, nuclear secrets. Today's technology, it's getting faster, it's getting better, it's getting harder, it's getting stronger, right? All the good stuff. I'm learning more from Wordle than I did in high school, okay? But how secure are these study apps? That's the million-dollar question. A year ago, we quickly saw how a flashcard app could expose nuclear secrets. Yeah, this is a big one. Nuclear bases around Europe are housing US troops, and while they're there studying, they're using online flashcard apps to remember complex security codes. Makes a lot of sense. They would use common sites such as Quizlet, Cram, CheckPrep, etc. There's one set of 70 cards, again holding top secret information, titled Study, with an exclamation mark. Study! There we go. Each card contained information regarding live and non-live nuclear weapons. Guys like 6 times 6, 36, okay, 8 times 8, 64, and that's a nuclear warhead. Okay, I don't know what this flashcard is. That's a nuke. Number 9, Guantanamo files. Back in April 2011, a pretty heavy leak hit the web. And no, it wasn't Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 3, it wasn't any of that. And no, it wasn't Avengers 1. WikiLeaks, who I covered in part 1 of the series, they also released the Guantanamo files, and they exposed the way prisoners were treated in Guantanamo Bay. In total, there were 779 documents that got released, and in said documents, it was discovered that innocent civilians, both from Pakistan and Afghanistan, were both being held there without any charges. It's brutal, there's some shady stuff going on. The age ranges as well for these prisoners go on from very young adults to an 89-year-old. So again, many of these prisoners are being held without any charges, and they're really young and really old, being treated like crap. This is a heavy leak, and in these documents we also see the way these prisoners are treated in detail. The way information was extracted from them was horrible. It was straight up torture. Number 8, off-road vehicles. Where we're going, we don't need roads. We're living in a pretty amazing time, I guess, when it comes to space exploration and travel and stuff. We recently sent off the James Webb Space Telescope to see even more of our universe. We're getting bigger and better. We're going deeper. 2020 was also the year where UFOs were just on the news. But what happens when these two worlds collide? Figuratively speaking, of course. Just over a year ago, an astrophysicist by the name of Eric Davis, he gave this classified briefing to the Defense Department mentioning these off-world vehicles. Secret off-world vehicles. What could he possibly mean by that? I mean the ISS, that is technically an off-world vehicle. Spaceships aren't new, you know what I mean? Well, he added the fact that these off-world vehicles were being made somewhere else as well. Not just, on Earth. Like some space BMW? I don't know. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is quoted in a Times article saying he believes that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred, and that any recovered materials should be studied. Okay, more than fair. Eric Davis also once produced this report to try and convince the government to invest in time travel and use wormholes to achieve such a task. Yeah, this is the Christopher Nolan segment of the list. This guy knows some stuff, for sure. He actually said he studied these crashed materials, and his conclusion is that there's no way humans could have ever created it. Yeah, I don't know. Alien materials? What do you guys think? Are we hiding alien tech? I think so. Number 7, weaponized lightning. This whole time I thought Thor worked for the Avengers. Apparently he's working for the CIA. How fun is that? Nice. Back in the late 60s, the scientist, who remains anonymous to this day, always a good sign, well, they figured out how to weaponize and bottle lightning. Can't imagine why Thor. They were determined to weaponize lightning to create Thor, I guess. That way there was little to no evidence left over after a planned attack. The idea, as crazy as it sounds, is pretty genius. Once it got online, people read it and they're like, oh, this is a good idea. It never made it to its final stages, thankfully, but when Forbes was allowed to release these declassified CIA files, we got a better idea of what was going on in the sky at the time. The plan was to drop these extremely thin metal wires from airplanes or rockets, whatever the case, something flying high in the sky. They would drop a metal fishing line through the clouds and then send many volts of electricity down to an enemy camp or whatever. That would for sure mess up their communications if it had worked. If, again, leaked ideas that never came to fruition.
In our 6th spot today, we have Operation Popeye. This is another very wild one. Operation Popeye was a highly classified weather modification program during the Vietnam War from 1967 to 1972. You heard me correctly. The government learned how to control the weather. Basically, they wanted to increase rainfall in certain areas to prevent enemies and military supply trucks from being able to travel. In fact, they caused a number of landslides and flooding in that area. Weather manipulation has since been banned from use for military gain. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with HIV. In the 1980s, the HIV epidemic broke out. No one knew how it spread, they just knew that it should be feared, and tons of LGBTQ+ community members were sadly contracting the virus. Well, rumor has it that HIV was a government experiment that was meant to wipe out the undesirables. Of course, the US government has denied this claim, and it's just a conspiracy, we don't know for sure. But based on the other experiments done on minority groups, it's hard to know what to believe. In our fourth spot today, we have Project 112 and Project Shad, or SHAD. Project 112 and Project Shad took place from 1962 to 1973 and involved a number of veterans or military personnel. Basically, both tests involved exposing these people to substances they might want to use in warfare. Nearly 6,000 people were exposed to Coxiella burnetii, which is Q fever, Staphylococcus enterotoxin B, which causes food poisoning, and sarin and soman gas. Sarin is a very, very dangerous nerve gas, and soman can cause death in minutes. Both can be fatal if only the tiniest amount gets on the skin. These men had no clue that they were being exposed to this. Moving on to number 3, we have Project Sunshine. This is another very messed up government project. During the 1950s, the US government was using stillborns to conduct radiation tests on. They wanted to determine the effects that radiation would have on humans and how much we could withstand in case of a nuclear fallout. They called this Project Sunshine, and it was anything but rainbows and sunshine. What's sad is that the government was stealing body parts and tissues from morgues without families' consent. It's said that more than 1,500 samples were gathered worldwide. This is incredibly sad and sick. Coming in at number 2, we have the syphilis experiments. In 1932, the US Public Health Service created an experiment to see the health effects of untreated syphilis. But the test subjects were told that they were receiving free treatment to cure their syphilis. And that was a lie. Instead of giving the men the recommended penicillin treatment, they gave them placebos, like aspirin. Sadly, 28 men died of syphilis because of these experiments, 100 more passed away from syphilis-related complications, and 40 spouses contracted this disease. And 19 women who gave birth passed on syphilis to their newborn children. In 1997, Bill Clinton apologized to the survivors and their families on behalf of the government. And he admitted that the tests were, and I quote, profoundly and morally wrong. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the radiation tests. In 1953, a number of tests were done on pregnant women to see the effects that radioactive iodine would have on them and their newborns. These studies were terrible. In one study, researchers gave these women doses of iodine 131. Sadly, they all miscarried. When they did, they continued to study the women's aborted embryos. Another study took place after World War II. 829 pregnant mothers in Tennessee were given vitamin drinks. They were informed that these drinks would improve their health and their babies. But it actually contained radioactive iron, and the researchers wanted to see how fast the radioisotopes crossed into the placenta. Several of the young passed away from these experiments. 4 died from cancers as a result of the experiments, and the women experienced rashes, bruises, anemia, hair and tooth loss, and cancer as well. Meanwhile, they just wanted the best for their babies and thought that this drink was going to help them, not kill them. Starting off this countdown, we have the Holm Experiments. This was a series of experiments in Sweden from 1945 to 1955. It's literally going to make you sick to your stomach when you find out what they did. Basically, they force-fed people with mental illness sweets to see if sugar was related to tooth decay. Imagine people just cramming food down your throat against your will. It's very gross. These experiments were conducted by the government and sponsored by the sugar industry. The experiments lasted for about 2 years, and by then the teeth of about 50 of the subjects in the experiment had been completely ruined. In our 9th spot, we had the UK Special Demonstration Squad. This is the name of a group of undercover police officers in the UK. Now, the things that they did are going to shock you. For example, they would steal birth certificates and identities of people that had died at a young age. They'd make make sure that they would be around their age and then use their identities. The younger the person died, the better, because that means they didn't already live a life that they would have to cover up. And then they would go around with this new identity. Some cases they actually got into relationships with women, but the whole time they did so just to spy on them. In November of 2015, the Metropolitan Police Force apologized to 7 women tricked into relationships by these officers. Like, imagine that, dating someone you're madly in love with, sometimes even having a kid with them, only for them to be like, oh, sorry, gotta go, was only dating you to get intel on you and your friend circle. It's disgusting, and it's actually happened to multiple women. In our 8th spot, we have the radioactive waste. Apparently, there's a huge radioactive dumping zone located in Tonawanda, New York. In fact, they dumped more than 37 million gallons of radioactive waste from their World War II atomic bomb tests. This area has a high rate of cancer and thyroid conditions, and this is the reason why, and no one's talking about it. In our 7th spot, we have the hepatitis tests. In 1956, the US government began running tests on young individuals living at the Willowbrook State School in Staten Island. This was a state-supported institution for children with intellectual disabilities. And what they did to these students was give them hepatitis in order to track the development of the viral infection. Of course, they were being experimented on without knowledge or consent. To make matters worse, the study lasted 14 years. They also injected them with a number of drugs to see what they would do to their body and the hepatitis. Imagine intentionally making a group of people sick for an experiment. The grossest part is that when the government was exposed for this project, they tried to justify their actions by saying that these people were probably gonna wind up contracting it anyways.
Number 6, Tamara Interrogation Center, Morocco. The Tamara Interrogation Center was a secret prison jointly operated by the CIA and the Moroccan government. The facility originally opened as a CIA-run secret interrogation center following the September 11th attacks. However, the CIA soon turned it into a prison, but was more interested in detaining political prisoners. Zakaria Momi, a French-Moroccan citizen who was held there for 4 days for political reasons, said his Moroccan interrogators told him he slaughterhouse and that he would leave in pieces. Another, Usama Boutar, who fought with the Bosnia-based Islamist Matilla group in the 1990s and in 2003, said the Moroccans told him that they were torturing him because the Americans told them to. Now, a report by the US Senate revealed that the CIA knew Morocco was torturing prisoners at the facility. The CIA complained to the Moroccan intelligence agency, but the complaint only destroyed the relationship between the CIA and the Moroccan government. The CIA also planned on abandoning the Terama site for another prison, but later changed its mind. Now, on the other hand, Morocco denies all accusations of torture, but I think they're both guilty. Number 5, Camp Lenamir, Djibouti. Let me start off by saying that Djibouti is a small country. Now, the strategic location of the small nation is the reason the US established a military base on its soil. From the base called Camp Lenamir, the US launched drone strikes against targets in Somalia and Yemen. There are also unconfirmed claims that the CIA operates a secret prison at the base. The US Congress reportedly has information about the existence of the facility but has refused to declassify it. Mohammed Abdullah Sahil Assad was one of the inmates supposedly held in the prison. He said he was tormented there before he was transferred to another black site in Afghanistan, where he was also mistreated. Mahdi Hashi, another supposed former prisoner, said he was taken to the prison after he was kidnapped by the CIA agents in Somalia. He claimed he was arrested because he refused to spy for British intelligence. Number 4, gay prisons, Chechnya. Chechnya is a Muslim-majority autonomous region of Russia. They have their own head of state, Razman Kadyrov, who Russia leaves to do as he wishes. Kadyrov has been accused of running secret prisons where gay men are mistreated so badly that they end up dying. Russia and Chechnya do not tolerate gay people, and while Russia has introduced laws to keep gay people in line, Chechnya prefers abducting them and keeping them in secret detention centers. Now, some journalists who reported the existence of the secret prison in Chechnya have been found dead under suspicious circumstance. Novaya Gazeta, the first paper to report the kidnappings, detentions, and deaths, has seen at least 6 of its journalists die. Now, some of its living journalists are still being threatened, and others have even fled the country. Number 3, black jails, China. The black jails are independent secret prisons illegally operated by various Chinese provinces and local government. Because of the governmental structure in China, citizens are expected to report any grievance to their local and provincial governments. Now, if they do not get justice, they are allowed to report to the central government at Beijing. Now, the central government itself uses the number of reports it receives to determine the effectiveness of the local and provincial government. Now, to avoid getting into Beijing's black books, the local and provincial governments employed over 10,000 people to hunt, kidnap, detain, and torture citizens who travel to Beijing to make reports. The prisons are usually unoccupied homes, psychiatric wards, and guest house. In 2009, it was suspected that the provinces operated 73 black jails inside Beijing. The central government initially denied the existence of black jails, but later confirmed that they were real. Number 2. Penny Lane, Guantanamo Bay. Penny Lane was another secret prison at Guantanamo Bay. Opened in 2003, the prisoners held there enjoyed a life of luxury. They lived in cottages complete with a very comfortable bed, kitchen, patio, shower, and television. And they could also request for additional luxuries. The fact that the inmates held in Penny Lane enjoyed a life of luxury shouldn't be very surprising, as the place was exclusively reserved for confirmed radical criminals undergoing training as double agents. After their training, they were released and allowed to return to their cells, where they sent inside information back to the CIA. Now, this information was used to prepare drone strikes against targets of interest. In exchange, the CIA gave the criminals millions of dollars in payment. The program was not a total success though, as some of the criminals rejoined their cells and never reported back to the CIA. Now, some also became unwillingly double agents after the CIA threatened to harm their families. Due to all of this, the double agent program ended in 2006. Papa II, India. In the 1990s, Indian military and local guerrillas clashed in the Kashmir region of the country, and the soldiers' methods of finding an enemy could get pretty brutal. The ID parade involved rounding up the boys and men of the area and showing them one by one to masked informers. Whoever the informer pointed at was taken away, where they were often taken to an interrogation center, where they were tormented or had their lives ended without much delay. Now, if they were really unlucky, they were taken to the Papa II prison camp, which was a place you'd rarely walk away from. Now, a 19-year-old Muslim student named Masraf Sultan is one of the lucky people to survive Papa II. Now, after he was picked out in an ID parade for reasons he did not know, he was beaten up, blindfolded, and taken away for interrogation. Now, despite his instance that he was innocent, Sultan was stripped naked, beat up so badly that several of his bones broke. After that, they took the poor, nude, broken young man and threw him in a cell of the infamous Papa II, which was on an old estate of a local ruler. Sultan's time in Papa II was short, but that didn't make it any less painful. The guards threw cold water at him, attached metal rings on his genitals and both his feet, and administered electric shock. Finally, he was taken away to a nearby flood channel where a group of soldiers shot him several times. Miraculously, he survived, but he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. Though the soldiers of the India's border security force used the facility to interrogate and end the lives of thousands of people, it was actually just one of 7 similar centers in the region.
Kicking off the list at number 10, nuclear site list. Here on Most Amazing, we love lists. I'm not sure if you can tell, but apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Back when Obama was still running the show, a report was delivered to Congress. Well, it was supposed to be. The 266-page report featured every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program, and it was released publicly on the government printing office's website in draft form by accident. Yeah, just a casual PDF that shows us literal maps to stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads back in the day. We love those. The only PDFs I actually enjoy are those ones, actually. Does this stuff happen often? How does this happen? I thought this type of stuff could never happen, right? Well, MIT professor John M. Deutsch said these screw-ups do happen, and it doesn't look like a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay, we'll trust the government. Thank you, sir. Let's do it. Number 9, ClimateGate. Yeah, we had a smooth one off the bat. Now we're getting right into the serious stuff. Climate stuff. Climate change and stuff. A little different sounding than Watergate, but we'll get to that one later on, obviously. ClimateGate, this was back in 2009 when some hackers released thousands of emails and files, all from the Climate Research Unit in the UK. These documents, okay, hold on to your butts for this one, they show scientists suppressing the publication of research going against global warming. So this sparked a bunch of bad ideas because at that point in 2009, we just believed it. We just stopped listening at all. Climate change critics were like, aha, I knew it. It was all a conspiracy this whole time. The CRU responded and said the emails were out of context and that the planet is indeed heating up, and we're still in fact fact burning towards our demise, but these docs leaked literally weeks before the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Denmark, so peculiar timing, I'd say. Science fired back pretty quick. Scientists all around the world were actively proving at that point that humans actively are causing global warming. Today we're scrambling a bit more to figure this one out than 2009. Yeah, a few more of you believe this time around. Number 8. God save the Queen. This one's quite grim, but I have to talk about it. Have you ever wondered what will happen after the Queen passes away? I mean, I know it's the last thing we want to think about right now because dark, obviously, but it's hard not to think of, especially when Politico magazine releases Operation London Bridge to the public. Yeah, what is that? This magazine somehow got documents showing each and every step in detail what'll happen when that fateful day arrives. There'll be phone calls to the Prime Minister, of course, would be first. Customs require that the Prime Minister is informed by the monarch's private security. Flags will fly at half-mast, of course, but oddly enough, in this document, the Queen's death is referred to as D-Day. Yeah, 9 days of protocols will follow afterwards, and after a service at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, that's when Queen Elizabeth will be buried with King George VI. It's dark, but I mean, imagine reading about this one morning in 2021. What an odd article. What a brutal way to wake up. Number 7. Secret PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation, but I'll do my best. Here we go. When it comes to the NSA, odds are this PowerPoint is going to be pretty juicy, right? This slideshow was often used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it? I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. That's all I'm saying, step your game up. This program was called PRISM. You probably heard about this. This is a big deal. And it cost about $20 million a year. This was the highlight of the Snowden leak. PRISM kicked off back in 2007. See, originally they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple come 2012, that's when things got a little dicey, as most things are with Apple. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants. Google, Skype, YouTube even, so I don't know, search history, you may want to delete that stuff. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States was accusing China of cyber attack, but right after Edward Snowden leaked the PRISM tea, they didn't have much power at said summit. So China and Europe citizens were obviously not too pleased here. Yeah, leaked data, we don't like hearing about that. This one gets a little worse. Number 6, spinning cube. Remember when UFO footage was being leaked in 2020? We had Senate hearings and we just didn't care. So many of these UFO documents ended up online from the 2020, alien leak, whatever that was. That was crazy. Some are too strange not to mention, evidently. Especially in a list of government secrets. So of course, we're gonna talk about some aliens. One of these leaked videos, I can't lie, there's some odd behavior going on here. In this video, we see a spinning alien cube almost. Yeah, it was spotted over Missouri and then only a couple hours later, it was seen again, but this time 700 miles away. So whatever it was, it's moving quite fast. 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day and the light reflecting off the cube caught his eye. But a day earlier, another dude, 30-year-old Justin Johnson, saw the exact same thing. He saw it driving home. He saw the light and the reflections also caught his eye in the sky. At first he thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were too odd, Maybe it's another drone project. What do we think? Is there cube aliens now? Some geometric aliens coming down? Someone call Shia LaBeouf. We have more cubes. We have space cubes. Number 5. Always listening. I mentioned earlier in part 1 that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden ended up leaking a PowerPoint training slideshow, and now the tables were all of a sudden turned. Snowden ended up revealing himself as the spy kid on June 12th, and he said that he planned on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since way back in 2009. More specifically, Snowden said the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. That's pretty eye-opening. It's a lot of stuff. You're seeing a lot of secrets in there. But there's many who see this hack as a good thing, of course. Citizens want to know what their governments are up to. I personally would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats, you know what I mean? So a poll was conducted on June 10th. Turns out 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. Yeah, 57% were not a fan of the NSA's actions, while 37% were on board. Number 4, friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States aren't safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. Yeah, the NSA tapped into 35 phones, not just a couple of guys this time around. They were spying on 35 world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA right after finding out and said that this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Yeah, she said friends, that's crazy. It's like when you show your buddy a photo on your phone and then they start swiping. You're like, hi, what are you doing? doing? Betrayal. What are you doing? Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader. I don't care. What's the big deal here? What can going through my phone really do? Well, it was also reported that they were monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. Yeah, just listening in, seeing what your aunt's up to. They monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, I'd be a little concerned. They're listening to your secret recipes. I hope no one's listening to my phone calls. I mean, who makes phone calls anymore, you know? I see a phone call come in and I'm like, If it's important, to leave a message. That's what I say. Even the NSA. Leave a message. Number 3, bird drones. Bird drones is not a new concept by any means, but it's fun. So fun. We gotta talk about it whenever we can. Back in the early 60s, the CIA had this secret program called Project Aquiline, where they used small drones with a low radar cross-section, a little camera almost, all that nice spy gadget stuff. They began working on this back in 1965, believe it or not, and the first prototype was a bit obvious. It was big. It weighed over 100 pounds. It was this massive eagle-looking camera, but the only way to catch it was to fly it into a net, which broke something almost every single test flight. So cut to 2022, yeah, there's probably a drone pigeon out there somewhere watching you. Olivia just did a couple lists on hidden cameras, so birds, drones, I mean probably. Some people think pigeons aren't even real. Some people think pigeons are drones sent by the government to watch us. I don't know. I think pigeons are pigeons. They look like pigeons. They found a hidden camera in a cactus, so sleep in fear, people. Number 2, backup files. When Glenn Greenwald kicked off this whole thing in 2013 with Snowden, it was this massive security breach, of course. Snowden was, of course, in immensely hot water, but he was also ahead of the game right from the start, before even getting caught, before even coming out. Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy were to happen to him in the future, well, he'll just leak even more information. Nice, we love backup files. You got dirt? Well, I got more dirt. Everyone's dirty. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, then it was set up to automatically send said private documents to higher ups and keep it going. AKA the people directly involved would still stay out of the picture. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. Yeah, this is why you make backups, people. Duly noted, Snowden. I put this backup script in another Google Doc, just in case the NSA comes around. And finally, number 1, Pine Gap. Going to the land down under for this one. Sorry, I said under. Should have said under, but I like it. Australia's fun. Pine Gap is a secret military compound built around the Cold War. It's been described as Australia's Area 51. Australia's Area 51? Area 51? I don't know. I love Australian accents, but I can't do them. I can't do it. I don't like spiders either. All we know, the secret base, this mysterious island, was revealed back in 2013 thanks to, you guessed it, Edward Snowden. This guy releases everything. We need another Snowden to come around. This guy's the OG. Turns out this island is not a resort. In fact, it's actually a satellite surveillance base that runs espionage operations. The NSA uses this facility for global interception, and they also collect internet and telephone communication records. Again, all those secret recipes that you're telling to your aunt, they're listening, they're taking it. They're like, oh, extra garlic, you bet. That makes sense. Back in the 70s, around 400 American families just happened to move to the nearby Alice Springs. Yeah, not a coincidence at all. Just that many families rolling in. Yeah, no government operations. Just, people just decided to move here. What does your husband do? Oh, he surfs the web waves. He surfs the waves. The waves, just the waves. Just that's it. Nothing to do with the web or online. Pine Gap, bring your kids and bathing suit. Have fun.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have SIM cards. We see all the time in movies and shows when people are trying to be super secret, they smash their phone and their SIM card, but as it turns out, maybe we should all be smashing our SIM cards, super secret lifestyle or not. In February of 2015, it was reported that Snowden provided documents that showed that the NSA and GCHQ had hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year, and they supply places like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and a variety of other providers. While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both voice and data transmissions of every user that has a SIM card made by this company. The company did reply to the situation and said that they had been the target of at least 2, quote, particularly sophisticated intrusions, and they suggested that they believed that the NSA and the GCHQ were responsible, but the company then denied that the hack was successful in gaining access to those encryption keys.
Number 9, quantum computer. This next one is eye-opening, to say the least. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are going to ruin my life. They're getting really good at those. I feel like an old man every time I see those and fall for it. But thanks to our man Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. How fun must that be? It's called the quantum computer, and it cost about $80 million to create. And no, it can't send you back in time. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, which is not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. I want to make so many jokes, but I won't. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, probably. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes, I don't know, years, but this supercomputer can break through a lot faster. I'm talking days. Just don't go in my MSN, please.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Dishfire. It was reported by The Guardian that it had been revealed that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world. They then use these messages to pull the details of certain location information, contact networks, and the credit card details of different mobile users. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of the data, just without the actual context of the text messages. So the NSA has all your secrets and nudies, but at least they didn't share them? I don't know. Basically, they have all of this data and at any point could potentially extract certain information like past travel plans, your financial transactions, your contacts, regardless of whether or not you were being investigated for something. Yes, this sounds illegal, unethical, and a little shady, and this revelation all came before former President Barack Obama gave a speech about proposed policy changes in reaction to the whistleblowing that was going on around Snowden and the NSA.
Number 7. Friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States are not safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, which, by the way, not just a couple of random dudes, they were spying on 35 world leaders. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out, of course, and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Really went personal with the friends comment there. It's like when you show somebody a photo on your phone and they start swiping, like, hi, hello, betrayal, see ya. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader, what's the big deal here? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month, so yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe. Number 6. Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States are not safe here, okay? Thanks to Snowden, our boy again, gotta mention him a couple times in this list, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of eyes, a lot of spies. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, not just a couple of dudes. They were spying on 35 world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Ah, brutal. She said the F word too. It's like, hey, we were friends, pal. Don't go through my phone. Don't swipe left in the photos, okay? Betrayal. Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring regular phone calls in Spain for the average folks. So if you thought you were off the hook, you're not, literally and figuratively. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe. You know, save some tea for in person. You don't want to give up all that good stuff on the phone. Number 5, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. Yeah, this feels like yesterday. I remember this all unfolding. I was like, what? How? Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker. They're what's referred to as these white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploding them, you know? Unlike Snowden or other people. That's the key, that's the Donnie difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here, so it was a big one. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, emails, you name it. Things you don't want other people knowing, let alone third parties, were all out there. If you could vote, you were exposed. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from software provider Nation Builder, but CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. Although he conceded that it is possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from the data we make available for free to campaigns. He's like, no, we didn't do it, but maybe we did. It's like, okay. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. That's terrifying. Time to change your email. Again, 7. Number 4, psychoelectronic weapons. Yeah, this sounds like something Iron Man uses. It doesn't sound too chill now, does it? Psychoelectronic weapons. The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these was by accident, as you could have guessed. He was receiving documents via Yahoo and they were not what he expected. See, originally he had filed a Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. See, he was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right, but he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. Guy gets a zip file back in return called EM effects on human body. He's like, Big Shiny Tune 6? He's like, what? I didn't ask for this. Way too many viruses in that one. Big Shiny Tune 7, I think, was the good one. That's the good one. In this document, he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. There's muscle quaking, all body pain. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams. Is this a weapon? This is pretty remarkable. This was clearly sent by mistake. The only emails I get are student loans, and those ones are not by mistake. Those ones are definitely on purpose. They're like, Mr. Taylor. I'm like, oh God, they found me. Number 3, quantum computer. This next one's pretty eye-opening. Here we go. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are also getting way too good. I've fallen for way too many fake trailers. I thought they were doing a Back to the Future reboot with Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. for like 4 days. All fake. Whole thing's fake. But thanks to our man Snowden, the OG secret revealer, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014 that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. Yeah, how fun must that one be? I wonder if it can run Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 without getting hot. No computer can do that. It's called the quantum computer and it costs about $80 million to create this program. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, not intimidating at all. It's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, hopefully, maybe, probably, definitely not. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes years. This supercomputer they're working on can break through a lot faster. You can get through in days, even hours. So you better clear that search history now while you still can. Thanks for the hot tips, Snowden. I was gonna switch to PC gaming, but you know what? I'll wait it out. I'll wait till this new one comes out. It looks a little faster. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Companies have to be somewhere, right? We're in a film studio in Toronto. We go to a certain place. We leave said certain place in a said certain area. Right? Where do places like WikiLeaks live? How do they stay secure? Well, in Stockholm, apparently, buried under 100 feet below street level in an old nuclear bunker. That's where. Right next to Pirate Bay. They're neighbors, actually. They knock on the cement walls. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. Now, this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks, but Julian Assange, front runner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so he's secure. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004 to 2009. Now, it's one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs out of the 109,000 confirmed in total. That's horrible. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics afterwards. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009. One of the biggest leaks in US history, no doubt about it. And finally, number 1, Watergate. Yeah, it's not an internet leak, but it's too good to talk about. This is OG, come on. We have to finish on Watergate. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were all arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Now, it was pretty obvious they intended on bugging the place. They looked like spy kids. They had all the gears. They were, it was fishy. As the year went on, the election came closer and closer, and then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that apparently the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage kicked off by none other than President Nixon himself. Yeah, he was trying to get that re-election. Now, despite this information leak and it being reported in the news and all that good stuff, Nixon was still re-elected, even though he was involved in this entire scandal. These men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement. It wasn't until a year later in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, they also came forward and exposed more stuff. Yeah, they exposed the administration's role in this entire scandal, and they had an inside source, an FBI agent named Mark Feltz, and this ultimately led to Nixon resigning later in 1974, the first president to do so.
Project Sunshine. Such a pleasant sounding name for such an eerie project. That juxtaposition just makes the whole thing even creepier. I like to call this the Frankenstein experiment because this study involved grave robbing. So it was carried out in secret by the government, which is insane. Starting in 1953, the United States Atomic Energy Commission carried out a series of studies on the effects of radioactive fallout. But in order to look at the effects of radioactive material, on the human body. Now, thankfully, they did not decide to snatch up a bunch of living people, but they did end up using a bunch of non-living samples. The problem was, the families of the dead were never told about this, and of course never consented. In 1955, the commissioner of the United States Atomic Energy Commission, Dr. Willard Libby, spoke about the need for human remains to be used in studies on radiation, and was quoted saying, "I don't know how to get them, but I do say that it is a matter of prime importance to get them, and particularly in the young age group. So human samples are often of prime importance, and if anybody knows how to do a good job of body snatching, they will really be serving their country." Yikes. Next on the list, Tuskegee syphilis study. So this was a long-running study beginning in 1932 all the way up until 1972, and considering what was going on here, it's pretty sickening it went on as long as it did. So this study focused on the effects of untreated syphilis in black men. Initially, it involved around 600 men. 400 of these guys had syphilis and 200 didn't. All of them were misled about the study's true purpose though. They were told that they were receiving free health care and burial insurance in exchange for their participation in the study, but the 400 men with syphilis weren't told they had it. The term bad blood was used to describe their condition, which was a local term that was just kind of vague, not referring to any specific condition. And these 400 men were given placebos just to maintain the guise of actually being treated in the study. And if this isn't all infuriating enough, even when an actual cure for syphilis became available in the form of penicillin in the 40s, the researchers intentionally withheld the treatment from the participants. So many of these guys suffered severe health problems, heart disease, blindness, and death. By the end of this quote-unquote study, which went on for 40 years, 28 patients died directly from syphilis, 100 died from complications. But that wasn't the only unethical study the US government carried out involving syphilis. There was also the Guatemala syphilis experiments, and this one may be even more shocking, if you can even believe that. So these experiments were carried out in Guatemala between 1946 and 48. It was to study the effects of syphilis, gonorrhea, and cankeroids, and testing the effectiveness of penicillin as a treatment. So there were about 1,300 Guatemalans involved in these experiments. Included in this group were prisoners, mental health patients, and even orphans. And no, the participants were not informed about the true nature of these experiments. Many were deliberately infected with syphilis without their knowledge or consent. In some cases, the researchers exposed participants to syphilis by allowing them to have contact with an infected individual. You can imagine what that contact was. In other instances, they directly inoculated participants with bacteria. Once they were infected, they would attempt to treat the subjects with penicillin, but not all participants were treated. By 1953, 83 of these unwitting participants died.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the Brazil spying scandal. It was reported by The Guardian that Brazil was second only to the United States in terms of the amount of communications that were being subjected to surveillance by the NSA. This means that the NSA were seriously spying on millions of Brazilians, including the emails and phone calls of their president. At the G20 summit that year, which took place in Russia, Brazil's president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, had a one-on-one meeting with Obama in reference to this. He said that he would look into it and get back to her, but before he could, more NSA tea was spilled, and it was revealed that the agency had also targeted Petrobras, which is Brazil's state oil company. This led the president to call this new information industrial espionage, and as a result, she called off her scheduled visit to the White House and demanded answers. The called off visit was important because it was to be the first state visit by a Brazilian president in about 2 decades, and although the Obama administration claimed that it was a joint decision made by both presidents, some media media outlets described it as the sternest punishment that had been received at that time in response to all of these NSA leaks. This also led Brazil to take a multitude of steps to hopefully get away from the American-run internet.
Number 5. Backup. When Glenn Greenwald kicked this whole thing off in 2013 with Snowden and his reveals, it was this massive security breach obviously. Snowden was of course in hot water immediately, but he was ahead of the game from the start. See, Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy happens to him, well, he'll just leak even more information. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, then it was set up to automatically send those private documents to higher ups, aka the people directly involved in the leak. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. This is why you make backups. Duly noted, Snowden.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the embassy catastrophe. There was a document from 2007 that was leaked which named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. This document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversation, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel.
Number 3. China. I mentioned earlier that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden leaked a PowerPoint training slideshow and the tables were turned just like that. Snowden revealed himself as this massive spy kid on June 12th, and he said he was planning on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out with all this information, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since back in 2009. That's a long time ago. It's like when Avatar 1 came out. That's how long ago that was. More specifically, Snowden said that the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. Now, of course, this is eye-opening, but there's many who see this hack attack as a good thing. See, citizens want to know what their government's up to, and honestly, I myself would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats. So a poll was conducted on June 10th and 11, and apparently 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing. They were with him, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. 57% were not a fan of the NSA's action, while 37% were on board. 30% of folks liked the fact that they were being spied on. That's some weird kind of kink, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you want the NSA in your Dropbox? Let us know in the comments your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you.
In our number 2 spot today, we have caller information. In 2013, it was reported by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by Snowden, the Obama administration has allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. This was done through what was called a quote business records provision of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of George W. Bush. It allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over caller information every single day. The information included things like the time, location, and duration of the call. The information began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Of course, once these documents were leaked and the information became public knowledge, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security, but many people rightfully felt like the spying was an unnecessary invasion of their privacy. This one is tricky because there certainly is a fine line with these things.
And finally, number 1. PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation, but when it comes to the NSA, odds are it's going to be a little juicy. This slideshow is used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it? I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. Step your game up. This program called Prism cost about $20 million a year, and it was the highlight of this leak. Prism kicked off back in 2007. Originally, they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple come 2012, well, that's when things got a little bit fishy, as most things are with Apple, specifically their maps. That was horrible. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants like Google, Skype, or even YouTube. Yeah, right here, they're listening right now. So your search history, emails, anything that rolls through those, usernames, passwords, well, they've got them. Even Skaterboy69 and Hotmail, odds are, they're already looking. You're done. You're canceled, Brad. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States were accusing China of cyber attacks, but right after Edward leaked this Prism T, they didn't have much power at that summit. China and Europe's citizens weren't too pleased here, and honestly, yeah, it's a botched meeting. I can understand why.
Did you enjoy this video about restricted government secrets? Well, make sure to check out some more government secrets like these uncensored alien photos. Click the video now to see more.